The projection screen still glowed with my findings when they all stood in unison. 12 executives, their faces contorted with a mixture of anger and disdain, pushed back their chairs simultaneously as if it had been orchestrated. My voice died mid-sentence as I spoke about the alarming quality failures I had uncovered. "We're done listening to her failures," Baxter, the COO, announced to the room. His voice carried that particular timbre of someone who believed himself untouchable. "This presentation is a waste of valuable time." The rustle of expensive suits filled the room as they gathered their tablets and notebooks. No one looked at me. No one spoke. The methodical way they ignored my presence felt calculated to maximize the humiliation. "The numbers speak for themselves," I said, struggling to maintain composure. "Our customers are perfectly satisfied," interrupted Vivian, the VP of Operations. Her smile never wavered as she added, "Perhaps you should consider whether you're suited for this level of responsibility." They moved toward the exit in a tight cluster. The sound of their Italian leather shoes against the floor seemed impossibly loud in the sudden silence. 12 executives, the entire leadership team, walking out while I stood there, hands still raised toward the data that showed indisputable evidence of their negligence. Monroe, the CFO, was the last to leave. He paused at the doorway, his hand hovering near the light switch. "Don't bother finishing. No one will read your report." He flicked the lights off, leaving me in semi-darkness, illuminated only by my damning presentation. 30 seconds passed in that dim room. My heartbeat slowed from racing panic to something steadier, colder. The betrayal crystallized into something harder, something actionable. I had anticipated this reaction, had practically counted on it. The public rejection was merely confirmation of everything I had suspected for months. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a number I had saved weeks ago, but hoped I wouldn't need to use. I pressed call. When she answered, I spoke 7 words that would change everything. "They did exactly what you said they would." "All of them?" asked the voice on the other end. "Every single one, and it's all recorded." A pause. "Give me 4 hours." I ended the call and sat back in my chair, staring at the data still projected on the screen. The quality failures, the cover-ups, the altered test results, everything they didn't want anyone to see. Before we continue, thank you for joining me on this journey. If you're finding this story intriguing so far, please hit that like button to help others discover it too. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you haven't already, consider subscribing so you don't miss what happens next. Trust me, you won't want to miss how this unfolds. My name is Leona. Until 3 months ago, I was the Quality Assurance Director at one of the country's leading industrial equipment manufacturers. Our products were in hospitals, schools, and government facilities nationwide, the kind of equipment people trusted with their safety without a second thought. I wasn't always the person who made powerful enemies. Growing up in a small industrial town, I learned early that systems had flaws, but honesty mattered. My father worked 30 years at the local factory, coming home with stories about corners cut and warnings ignored. When the plant closed after a preventable accident, I promised myself I would never stay silent if lives were at risk. My reputation in the industry was built on thoroughness. I fixed broken systems without damaging the companies I worked for. I was known as someone who found solutions, not someone who created problems. That's why they recruited me. "We need someone with your integrity," Baxter had said during my final interview, his smile warm and convincing. "Minor inefficiencies have crept into our processes. Fresh eyes, that's all we need." My predecessor, Thomas, had left suddenly. Health issues, they claimed. His team seemed oddly reluctant to discuss him. When I asked about his documentation, I received vague responses about his unique system that hadn't been properly transferred before his departure. The first warning sign came during my facility tour. Nadia, a quality technician with 8 years at the company, showed me around with mechanical precision. Her answers felt rehearsed until we reached the testing lab. When I asked about their validation protocols, her eyes darted toward a small camera in the corner before answering. "We follow established company procedures," she said, her voice tight. Later that week, I found testing results that didn't match the manufacturing outputs. Equipment that failed critical safety checks was being shipped with approval signatures. When I brought this to my team, they stared at their hands, silent and afraid. Just follow established protocols, Baxter instructed when I requested a private meeting. Previous leadership complicated things unnecessarily. The next day, a bonus notification appeared in my company account, substantially more than my contracted amount. No explanation was provided. I declined the bonus and continued investigating. The patterns became clear. Our flagship medical equipment line had critical safety flaws that were being deliberately concealed. Testing protocols had been modified to hide defects. Customer complaints were being redirected and buried. The issue isn't with the product, Vivian explained when I presented my initial findings privately. It's with user expectations. Every industry has acceptable margins of error. Not when those errors could harm people, I countered. She slid a folder across her desk. Inside was a revised employment contract with a substantial salary increase and an unusual confidentiality clause. Everyone benefits from regulatory flexibility, she said, tapping the signature line. We reward team players generously. I took the contract, told her I'd consider it, and continued gathering evidence. That night, I received an anonymous email with previous safety reports, ones that had been altered in our official records. The sender's message was simple. Tomas wasn't sick. The morning of my presentation to the executive team, I found Nadia waiting by my car in the parking garage. "They're setting you up," she whispered, constantly checking over her shoulder. "They've told everyone your report is attention-seeking exaggeration. Baxter already has your termination paperwork prepared." "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because Tomas tried to do the right thing too." Her voice cracked slightly. "He didn't deserve what happened to him." She walked away before I could ask more, but something in her eyes, the same haunted look I'd seen in my entire team, solidified my decision. I made one crucial modification to my presentation before the meeting, removing one slide that contained the most damning evidence and saving it for another purpose. After the executives abandoned the meeting room, I sat alone in the semi-darkness. The call I made wasn't to a journalist or a lawyer. It was to Eliza, the lead investigator at the regulatory agency overseeing our industry, someone who had been quietly building a case for months. "I sent you everything from today," I told Eliza. The walkout was almost exactly as we predicted, and they made those comments about the Cincinnati incident on record. Her voice was measured and professional. Yes, Monroe specifically mentioned handling it like Cincinnati when discussing the suppressed incident reports. Perfect. That connects the dots we needed. Keys clicked in the background. Stay where you are for now. Act normal if anyone returns. I gathered my materials slowly and methodically. The humiliation that should have crushed me had instead hardened into something dangerous: certainty. For 3 months, I had been building a case while they thought they were breaking me down. The first time I contacted Eliza wasn't planned. I had found her name buried in correspondence my predecessor had hidden in encrypted files. Tomas hadn't left for health reasons. He had been systematically documenting the same issues I had discovered. His final report had vanished the same day as his sudden departure. When I reached out to Eliza, she was cautious. "Tomas stopped responding to my inquiries 3 months ago," she explained. "The company claimed he was unavailable due to medical leave." "He's not sick," I said. "At least, not according to his wife, whom I tracked down yesterday. She says he took a massive settlement with a gag order after being threatened with fraud charges." Our collaboration began that night. We knew a frontal assault wouldn't work. The executives had covered their tracks too carefully, with armies of attorneys ready to bury any accusation. We needed them to incriminate themselves, preferably on record. After leaving the meeting room, I walked through the empty halls to my office. The silence felt weighted now, expectant. I checked my watch. 2 hours until Eliza's team would make their move. My office door was ajar. Inside, sitting in my chair, was Vivian. "That was quite a spectacle," she said, turning my computer monitor toward her, "though not surprising given your approach." I set my materials down carefully. "Was there something else you wanted to say that you couldn't share with the group?" She smiled that particular smile that never showed teeth. "You know, Leona, I actually argued for hiring you. Your reputation for fixing problems impressed me, but you misunderstood your assignment from the beginning, which was to fix the perception problem, not create a new one." She stood, smoothing her skirt. "Your position has been terminated, effective immediately. Security will collect you in 20 minutes. Whatever materials you've gathered stay here, including my personal notes." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Everything. The company owns all work product created during your employment." "I understand," I nodded somberly. Something in my calm acceptance made her suspicious. "This isn't a negotiation, Leona. You've made enemies of people who don't forget, people with influence across the entire industry." "Is that a threat?" "It's reality. Your career ended the moment you decided to go against this team." She moved toward the door. "Though I respect your principles, misguided as they are." "Principles aren't much compared to 12 executives' unanimous opinion," I said. She paused at the doorway. "Exactly. No one will believe your word against ours." After she left, I sat at my desk and opened my drawer. Inside was a small device that had been recording every conversation in my office for the past 10 weeks. I slipped it into my pocket just as my phone buzzed with a text from Eliza. "We're ahead of schedule. 4 agents arriving now. Meet in lobby in 10. I gathered my personal items, just enough to appear compliant without raising suspicion. As I walked through the department, my team watched with expressions ranging from pity to fear. Some knew what was coming, others thought they were witnessing my final departure and disgrace. Nadia caught up with me near the elevator. "They're saying you tried to blame production for design flaws," she whispered. "Baxter's already announcing your replacement." "Are they now?" I pressed the down button. "Interesting timing." "What will you do?" Her voice trembled slightly. The elevator arrived with a soft chime. "Sometimes," I said, stepping inside, "you have to let people believe they've won before they realize they've lost." The lobby was bustling with afternoon activity when the glass doors swung open. 4 individuals in dark suits entered, led by Eliza herself. Her badge was already visible as she approached the security desk. "Regulatory Enforcement Division," she announced, her voice carrying across the marble flooring. "We have a warrant to access specific records and conduct interviews." The security guard looked panicked, reaching for his phone. Within minutes, the lobby transformed into carefully controlled chaos. Employees stopped to watch. Phones came out. Someone from legal rushed down demanding to see paperwork. I stood near the reception desk, observing as Eliza handed over documents and explained the situation with clinical precision. Her team dispersed towards the elevators, accompanied by thoroughly unsettled legal representatives. Baxter appeared, red-faced and hissing instructions to a junior attorney who looked increasingly alarmed. When Baxter spotted me, his expression transformed from anger to calculating suspicion. He strode over, positioning himself to block my view of the proceedings. "I hope you understand what you've done," he said quietly. "This little tantrum will destroy more than just your career." "That sounds concerning," I replied. "Maybe you should share those thoughts with the agents upstairs." His face tightened. "You signed confidentiality agreements. Anything you've shared was provided through proper regulatory channels," I finished for him. "Nothing outside standard reporting requirements." The color drained from his face as he processed the implication. I hadn't leaked anything to the press or competitors. I had simply followed mandatory reporting protocols they had been circumventing for years. "You have no idea what forces you're playing with," he said, his voice low. "This company has survived worse than one disgruntled employee." I smiled, maintaining eye contact. I'm not disgruntled, Baxter. I'm doing exactly what you hired me to do, ensuring quality standards are met. Something in my expression must have unsettled him because he stepped back slightly. Security will escort you out now. Actually, said a voice behind him, Miss Leona will be staying to assist our investigation. Eliza stood there, her badge prominently displayed. We have some questions about the presentation that was interrupted earlier today. The next 4 hours unfolded like a carefully choreographed dance. Agents moved through the building, securing servers and documentation. Executives were isolated for interviews. Employees watched wide-eyed as years of careful deception began unraveling in real time. I sat in a conference room, not the one from earlier, answering questions and providing context as Eliza's team built their case. Through the glass walls, I could see the growing realization spreading across the office as whiteboards were filled with timelines and connections. At 4:30, Monroe, our CFO, was escorted from his office, ashen-faced and silent. By 5:15, 8 more executives followed, not in handcuffs, but clearly no longer in control. As they passed the conference room where I sat with Eliza, Baxter locked eyes with me. The recognition flickering across his face, understanding that the woman they had dismissed as incompetent had systematically dismantled their entire operation, was almost worth the 3 months of anxiety and gaslighting. But this was only the beginning. What none of them knew yet was that tomorrow morning their carefully constructed house of cards would completely collapse in ways none of them could possibly anticipate. The evidence secured today was just one piece of a much larger puzzle, one that had been forming for years before I even arrived. The true scale of what was coming wouldn't be clear until the emergency board meeting scheduled for 8 a.m. By then, it would be too late for damage control, too late for lawyers, too late for anything except watching their perfectly constructed world burn to ashes. And I would be there to witness every moment. The next morning arrived with the surreal brightness that follows life-altering events. I dressed methodically, charcoal gray suit, minimal jewelry, hair pulled back severely. Today wasn't about making an impression, it was about watching accountability unfold. Sleep had evaded me, but adrenaline provided perfect clarity. 3 months of careful documentation, strategic alliances, and deliberate patience were about to culminate in this emergency board meeting. The company headquarters looked different in the early morning light, vulnerable somehow. Security had been increased, with unfamiliar guards checking IDs at every entrance. News vans waited at the perimeter of the property, held back by temporary barriers. Miss Leona, a woman I didn't recognize, greeted me at the executive entrance. I'm Zoe, assistant to the board chair. You're expected upstairs. The executive floor was eerily quiet. Glass offices that usually bustles with activity stood empty, their occupants notably absent. Computer screens displayed login pages that would never again welcome their usual users. Zoe led me to a side room, adjacent to the main boardroom. Through a partially open door, I could see people gathering. Somber faces, urgent whispers, water glasses no one touched. Wait here, Zoe instructed. The chair will call you in when they're ready. Alone, I checked my phone. A message from Eliza. Second phase proceeding now, 9 search warrants being executed simultaneously. I smiled. Perfect timing. From the boardroom, voices grew louder. Someone was demanding answers. Another was insisting on legal representation. A third voice, firm and authoritative, cut through the chaos. This meeting will come to order, announced Edmund, the board chair. We face unprecedented allegations that require immediate action. The door swung open. Edmund, a silver-haired man with calculating eyes, nodded at me. Please join us, Miss Leona. The boardroom contained 23 people, the full 12-person board, several senior executives who hadn't been at my presentation yesterday, and a cluster of grave-faced attorneys. The 3 empty chairs at the table were conspicuous. For those who haven't met her, this is Leona, our Quality Assurance Director, or rather, our former director, according to termination papers that were apparently filed yesterday afternoon. Papers I never approved. Murmurs rippled across the room. Leona has agreed to present her findings directly to this board before speaking with federal investigators later today. Baxter, who sat rigid near the far end, interrupted. This is highly irregular. Our attorneys should review any materials before— You've forfeited that privilege, Edmund cut in sharply. The regulators have already seized most company records. We're trying to understand what's happening before the markets open and this company loses half its value. He nodded toward me. The floor is yours. I connected my tablet to the presentation system. The screens darkened, and the room illuminated with the same slides I had begun showing yesterday. As I started explaining yesterday before the executive team departed, I began, my voice steady. Our quality assurance protocols have been systematically compromised for approximately 36 months. For the next 40 minutes, I methodically laid out everything I had discovered: altered test results, suppressed incident reports, modified safety parameters. I showed communications proving deliberate concealment of equipment failures, including 3 that had resulted in patient injuries at hospitals. The board members' expressions shifted from skepticism to shock to barely contained fury. This can't be accurate, insisted Vivian when I paused. These are isolated incidents being presented without context. Actually, I replied, I haven't even shown you the most concerning evidence. I switched to a new set of slides, ones no one had seen before. These contained financial records showing patterns of suspicious payments to offshore accounts following regulatory inspections, tracing diagrams linking executive bonuses to falsified quality metrics, and email chains discussing containment strategies for potential whistleblowers. "Where did you get these?" demanded Monroe, his voice hoarse. "From your predecessor, Tomas," I replied calmly. "Before he was forced out, he created secured backups of everything. He anticipated being silenced, just not how thoroughly you would do it." I turned to the board. Tomas didn't leave because of health issues. He left because he was given a choice: sign a settlement with a gag order or face manufactured fraud charges. His final act was encrypting these files with instructions that they be sent to specific people if he didn't reset a digital timer every month. "That would be theft of company property," one attorney interjected. Edmund raised his hand for silence. "Continue, please." When I was hired, I received an anonymous message with access information to these files. At first, I thought it might be a trap, but as my own investigation confirmed the same patterns Tomas had documented, I realized the truth. I clicked to the next slide. Video footage for my presentation the previous day appeared, capturing the moment the executive team walked out, including their disparaging comments. The crystal-clear audio brought a painful silence to the room. "You recorded that illegally," Baxter snapped. "Actually," I countered, "all meeting rooms in this building have automatic recording capabilities for archival purposes, as stated in the Company Policy Manual, Section 4.3. I simply requested access to those archives this morning, which Edmund approved." Edmund's expression revealed nothing, but the slight nod he gave me spoke volumes. He had been meticulous in following proper channels, giving the company no technical violations to use against us. "This morning," I continued, "federal agents are executing search warrants at 9 executives' homes. They're specifically looking for communications about the Cincinnati incident from last year, the one where equipment failure in an operating room was blamed on user error, despite internal documentation proving otherwise." The color drained from several faces around the table. "How do you know about Cincinnati?" Monroe whispered. I tilted my head slightly. Because I was hired to discover exactly these types of issues. The fact that you tried to prevent me from doing my job doesn't mean I stopped doing it. For the next hour, the meeting devolved into crisis management. External counsel was called, press statements were drafted, and market analysts were contacted. Through it all, I sat quietly, watching their worlds collapse in slow motion. By noon, trading of the company's stock had been temporarily suspended. By 2, 9 resignation letters had been submitted. By 4, federal prosecutors announced preliminary charges against 7 executives, with more expected. As the day wound down, Edmund asked me to stay behind after the others had left. "You've been planning this for months," he said once we were alone. It wasn't a question. From the 3rd week of my employment, once I understood what was happening, I had 2 choices: become complicit or bring it all down. "You could have come to me directly." I studied him carefully. Could I have? 3 board members were aware of these issues, Edmund. Their signatures appear on approval documents for the modified testing protocols. He had the grace to look uncomfortable. Not all of us knew the extent. Ignorance by choice is still a choice. He nodded slowly, accepting the rebuke. "What happens now?" "That depends on you. The company can survive this, but not with the same leadership structure, not with the same priorities." "And where do you fit in that future?" I smiled. "I don't. My resignation will be on your desk tomorrow. My work here is finished." The next morning, I watched from my apartment as news channels displayed footage of executives being escorted from their homes. The company's stock had dropped 42% at opening. Class action lawsuits were being assembled. Industry analysts predicted a complete leadership overhaul. What none of them knew, what no one except Tomas, Eliza, and I understood, was that this had never been about revenge for my humiliation. It had been justice for the patients harmed by faulty equipment, for the employees threatened into silence, and for the systematic corruption that valued profit over safety. The revenge had not been the public downfall or criminal charges. Satisfying as those were, the true revenge had occurred in that moment when 12 powerful people simultaneously revealed their character by walking out, believing their unified front made them invincible, never suspecting that their synchronized abandonment was the final piece of evidence we needed. They thought they were demonstrating power. Instead, they were sealing their fate. My phone rang, a number I didn't recognize. "Is this Leona?" asked an unfamiliar voice. "It is. This is Dr. Harrington at Memorial Hospital. We've been following the news about your former company. Our medical safety board would like to discuss a potential consulting position, helping hospitals identify compromised equipment. Would you be interested?" I smiled. Very much so. Sometimes the best revenge isn't watching your enemies fall. It's using their destruction to build something better upon the ruins they left behind. If you've made it to the end of this journey with me, I can't thank you enough for listening. The courage to stand up against powerful forces often comes from knowing others understand your story. Please consider hitting that like button if this resonated with you, and subscribe for more true accounts of corporate justice. Drop a comment sharing your thoughts or experiences. There's strength in our shared stories. Until next time, remember that no amount of power can withstand the weight of truth when it finally breaks free.